Hello, and thanks for joining us today. I'm super excited you could be here because today we're talking about a couple different really cool, unique ways to be able to invest into real estate. As a matter of fact, we're not just talking about how to invest in real estate. We're talking about probably one of the easiest, less resistance paths for you to be able to break into an industry that can get you really, really, really good returns without doing all the work. And I think you're going to love these asset classes that we're actually jumping into today. And with us is Kevin Bupp. Now, Kevin, the cool thing about Kevin is he's one of the only people that's been on our show more than one time because he comes on and he talks about things and I can't stop thinking about it. Like months later, I'm like, wow, that guy was so smart. Like that was a lot of really cool stuff. I never thought of it that way. And so now he's doing some even cooler stuff that I think you're really going to love. So Kevin is a Florida-based real estate investor with an impressive track record with over $300 million in real estate transactions. He's also a top Apple podcast host and best-selling author of the book, The Cash Flow Investor. Now, with more than 2 decades of experience in the field, Kevin has honed in on what he believes to be top real estate investments in the current market, mobile home parks, and parking lots. He also shares his expertise with millions of listeners on his podcast, Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. Excuse me there, guiding on how to find and invest profitably in commercial real estate. But Kevin's impact extends well beyond just investing. He's the founder of Sunrise Capital Investors, a private equity firm that makes commercial real estate investments accessible to passive investors, helping them build legacy and achieve financial freedom. Kevin, what's up, man? Thanks for coming on with us
What's
today.
up, Ty? Thanks for having me back, man. I appreciate the kind words. Hopefully, I can live up to those expectations in the bar that you set. But
Well, I
excited to
think
be
last
back.
time you were here, we talked about mobile home parks. But, the interesting thing
Yeah,
is we've never talked about parking lots. We've never talked about it on the show. I didn't even
yeah.
know it was a thing until
Neither
you
did
told
I.
me it was a thing.
I,
So
I think that's how those things kind of go, right? Like I never, you know, that somebody owns it, right? Someone's making money from it, whether it's a city or a private owner. And I never considered it either until about five or so years ago. But here we are today. We own a number of parking lots in a number of different markets, and it's been a great asset class.
yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting that we're here because, we're both in Tampa Bay and I see it all the time. I'm in downtown. So I look at it and I have
Yeah,
conversations with people all the time about like how profitable it could be to own a parking lot, right? Because you know how it is in downtown. Like they're literally, I think, beside the Floridian Hotel, building a 5 or 7 story parking garage right there in
yep.
prime real estate. So I just think it's so interesting. I've never met anybody that invests in that asset class. What attracted you to that asset class?
Yeah. So again, back to the point of I'd never met anyone either that invests in that asset class. And about 6 or so years ago, I always like to have really interesting, somewhat niche guests on my show as well. I like to mix it up a little bit on my podcast. And I found a guy that happened to be he was a broker slash investor in the parking world. Like that was his specialty. And I'll tell you that less than a handful of folks exist within that brokerage world that specialize in parking. So I mean, like it's literally he was like one of five people. In fact, there's even less now because it's just not a commonly known asset class. It's not really one that's on the radar of lots of big institutional groups or even groups like ourselves. And so, but anyway, I had this guy on the show. I was intrigued. I didn't know anything about the business model. You can't just go buy a book on parking lot investing. It didn't really exist. And so I did as much research as I could, but I didn't understand the model. I didn't even know what the model was. And so I had him on the show and asked him all the questions I wanted to ask. And by the end of that hour, I was so intrigued, man. I couldn't stop, to your point, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I met him at a conference a few months later, had follow-up questions, talked to him many times, for the year or two thereafter that, and attended conferences. I just wanted to learn as much as I could because it just seemed like such a fragmented asset class, which was one of the primary things that attracted me to mobile home parks a decade plus ago. Like there wasn't a lot of institutional capital in it, a lot of mom and pop owners. It didn't have a ton of competition. And there was also, the opportunity to buy a cash flowing asset. But even more important with parking, we look at it as a cash flowing asset that's more so a covered land play. So it makes a ton of economic sense as a current investment being used as parking, but we only buy parking in areas to where we know that the lowest use today is parking. And inevitably, whether it takes 5 or 10 or 15 years, there would be a much higher and better and more valuable use than that of parking. And so, again, I'd mentioned the asset we bought in Clearwater Beach. That's irreplaceable real estate. You can't get another acre smack dab in between the Gulf of Mexico and the Intercoastal Waterway. There's no big parcels like that remaining. The ones that are remaining are already being built up into condominiums. There's a moratorium on new parking. You can't build a standalone parking garage in Clearwater Beach any longer. And so I know that we will ride that ship for however many years or decades it might be. But inevitably, we own a lot of air rights above that, and it will be probably a higher, better use as a redevelopment, whether it be a high-end condo or hotel at some point in the future, to where it will make a ton more money even than what it's making today as parking. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer to your question. An interview many years back intrigued me on the idea. I dug deeper, and then we didn't start buying it until 2020. So it's been we studied it for years, probably about 2.5, 3 years before we actually pulled the trigger and bought the first parking investment. And we love the asset class. It's proven very resilient as long as you're in the right markets. Even during COVID, COVID kicked parking's butt, um, especially in like downtown areas. But it's funny, like our garage in Clearwater Beach killed it during COVID. It actually did better during COVID because everyone was coming to Florida. Everyone was trying to go to the beach. So it's been a fun asset class. And anyway, I'll stop there. You probably have a lot of questions. I don't want to keep rambling on.
No, it's funny you say that because I actually lived at St. Pete Beach that time. Like I was like, I'm not going to be, holed up in the home. So I actually went to St. Pete Beach, which was interesting because spring break, it was usually packed and it was completely dead. I've never seen something so freaky down here. But yeah, it's interesting. I was one of those people that was down there, like making that whole industry explode during that time.
Yeah.
So that's this. Well, let me ask you this. Well, what else surprises do you have? Like both in mobile home parks, and in parking. What when you got into these, what surprised you that you didn't expect? Mobile home parks maybe harder to answer because it was a bit ago.
No, not so much. I would say with mobile home parks and surprises. I think it'd probably more fall in line with like some of the bigger risks that maybe we didn't perceive to be huge risk in the beginning that ultimately they are the things that make or break us buying a deal. Like we're in contract with a portfolio right now, and I believe it's dead. I believe as we went, and if you'd asked me 3 weeks ago, like what could potentially come up that would truly kill this deal because we're buying at an incredible price. However, the infrastructure on all three of these parks, most of these parks are built, 40, 50 years ago. So you can expect some aging infrastructure like water lines and sewer lines, even some electrical and things like that, that we always budget for improving, to actually replacing and improving. But this one literally takes it to a new level. Like they literally haven't done a thing for 50 years. And, the capital budget that would be necessary to fix everything is about 8 times that of what we originally anticipated. It's in horrific shape. And so I think that's where folks can truly have a gotcha. Like we've spent about $100,000 on due diligence between these three properties. And so like that's going to be lost pursuit costs. Like that's literally money that we're not going to get back, but it would have saved us millions of dollars of potential future unexpected expenses. But then on top of that, a lot of drain on resources because if we buy these properties, our team is going to have to work 3 times harder to get these things up to par before we can start really executing on the original business plan, right? Like we gotta you gotta play catch up there. And so I think those are big ones, like infrastructure, so and even more specific than that, like private utilities. So we own many parks that have well systems that supply water to the entirety of the community. We own communities that have their own like wastewater treatment plants, basically a miniature version of what services our city, like where we we go to the bathroom, it gets treated somewhere. We own communities where we have our own inclusive treatment plant. And those things, if they're not maintained, if you don't keep up the standards, not only do you have regulatory issues, but you've got really expensive repair bills, and sometimes maybe into the millions of dollars. And if you don't budget for that, it could literally be the difference of making money and completely losing millions of dollars on a deal. So that's huge. And like I said, just giving the example of one we're in right now that I think I've got a call later today. I believe that we're going to kill the deal because there's too much risk associated with it and there's too much work. I'm okay with hard work, but that one, there's too many variables. When you start talking about, additional millions of dollars of expected repairs, there's still unexpected things in there that are going to come into play. And so I've seen a lot of people lose money for that reason alone. They don't spend enough time on due diligence. They kind of go along the premise of, mobile home parks are cash cows. I mean, like that, for whatever reason, that statement still sticks around. Anything could be a cash cow if you buy it right. But if you don't budget accordingly going into it, you could lose your ass just as easily. So, and then outside of that, I say with parking, I guess maybe surprises and knock on wood. We actually didn't buy, we held off for many years to buy just because we like to focus on like what we specialize in. That was mobile home parks. We don't like going out of our lane. And I love a lot of other asset classes, but we really like to stick with what we're good at. And we don't want to dilute our focus. And so when we started looking at parking, we looked at it, we went to conferences, we met people, kind of dug into the industry, but it took us many years to pull the trigger. And then COVID hit. And we actually didn't pull the trigger until late 2020 when we realized the world wasn't going to end and that there were still good markets that were thriving, i.e. the beaches and in the sunny areas, and more red states were still thriving during COVID because everyone was trying to migrate there. And so I'd say that the one big surprise with parking, and this is a black swan event. COVID was a black swan event. Not saying something like that will never happen again, but I'm very grateful that we didn't buy parking before 2020 hit, because there's probably some opportunities that we would have bought that were tied, maybe not a lot to office, meaning like the demand drivers, who's parking in that parking garage. Um, maybe 20 or 30% of the folks that were using the garage were tied to office properties, maybe one office property or a couple office properties. And then, the transient traffic might have been tied to like just downtown traffic, daytime traffic, nighttime traffic. Well, in a lot of cities, that completely stopped. Not only did office completely go in the toilet, right? Like it was already a downward spiral, but that was kind of like the nail in the coffin. And then on top of that, being that people weren't actually working in these office buildings in a lot of downtown areas, they weren't down there eating lunch, shopping. I mean, like there was no cars coming down there. And so the parking industry absolutely got its butt kicked in certain, locations during COVID, urban core locations. But the, tourist destinations absolutely thrived, areas that were near waterfronts or beaches and things like that. So anyway, like that was, again, timing worked in our favor there, and I'm grateful for it. But that was a big shocker of how impactful COVID was, or this black swan event was to that particular industry. To many other industries as well, but parking got its clock cleaned.
Yeah, that's cool. And I apologize, my duck phone. The only people that can break through my phone are my kids. So like it always be that way. Like every time you hear the duck, it's like one of my kids is calling.
Oh,
So
that's
I'll
funny.
text him back right now. But I think it's interesting, and that's what I love about creating Sunrise Capital Investors, because what I hear, what you hear is that I have horror stories I can tell you of people that have listened to a podcast. They get into mobile home park storage units, something that's way above their head, even commercial, even residential, even STRs, LTRs, long-term rentals, short-term rentals. And the same thing happened. They way underestimate the cost, the expense, the time, and they lose it. I mean, it literally bankrupts people. So that's what I love about what you do, because you just have an easy path for people to be able to get in and invest, where they have your knowledge, your experience, your years of vetting everything, where they don't have that happen. So I don't mean to kind of pivot, but can you tell me a little bit more about that? If I want to invest, for example, in parking lots or mobile home parks, but I don't want to lose my butt because I don't know what's going on. How do you guys make it work where someone like me can get in and still make money and earn the return without doing all the work, or without losing my butt because I don't have the knowledge?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So we operate under a Reg D 506C offering, and so accredited investors, those that meet the accreditation status, can ultimately invest alongside us. And I guess more specifically, become partners of ours. I mean, they're ownership partners. Sharing the cash flow, sharing the profits, but not necessarily have to do the work. And so most of the capital that we raise come from these types of high net worth individuals, most being busy professionals, business owners, doctors, lawyers. I mean, you name it, right? Folks that are making a lot of money in their profession, and ultimately don't have the additional time, or maybe just the skill set to go out and personally invest. Right? It takes time to go buy property. You don't just buy it and set it and forget it. If you got a management company, there's still involvement on your part, and so a lot of folks just, even if they, in fact, a lot of our investors have probably ventured down that path to a certain degree. Maybe some actually went and bought property and realized, man, like this is taking up my weekends. This is taking up a lot of time. I don't want to deal with this. I'd rather kind of let someone else that, that does this day in, day out. Just like maybe I'm a doctor or a dentist. I do that day in, day out. Let them do what they do well, and I do what I do well, and let them, provide returns on my behalf. And so that's what we do. We do all the heavy lifting, but that's our day to day. Like that's what I do. That's what our team does. We get into the trenches, we identify opportunities, we run due diligence on them, and then we go forth and execute on the business plan, which are typically major capital improvements that we make in the properties, and that's how we add value. And so again, our investors that come along with us on that ride get to participate on all that upside, but also the cash flow along the way, and then any profits on the back end when we either do a cash out refinance or divest of an asset. So but they're not having to do any of the heavy lift. The heaviest lifting they have to do is actually, make a wire, from their bank into our company, and we pretty much do the rest.
What kind can you even talk about what kind of returns your investors get? I don't know if that's something you can disclose, FTC disclosure, like it might not be
Yeah.
typical of what people might see, but do you have an idea there?
Yeah, I mean, so we currently are we have an open offering today. It's our fourth fund. We launched the very first fund back in late 2016. I've been investing for nearly 20 years, but as far as like a formal fund offering through Sunrise, we launched the first one late in 2016. Our current fund, we've got three different tranches for accredited investors, and it really depends on basically how much their initial capital contribution is going to be. And so it can be an 8 pref, 9 pref, or 10 pref. Not to get too granular, but basically you get an 8% preferred return if you invest anywhere from 100,000 to 249,000. You get a 9% preferred return if you invest anywhere between 250,000 and 499,000, and then a 10% preferred return if you invest over $500,000. And then we do have some other incentives and bonuses for anyone that's going to truly come in with maybe a much larger slug, maybe multiple $1 million slug. We've made some additional agreements that we can kind of cater to individually. But outside of that, that's just on the preferred return side. But as far as like what the life cycle looks like of our deals and what we kind of have targeted for this particular fund is somewhere in the realm of 15 to 70% internal rate of return over the life cycle of that fund. I will say that our other three funds, we've exceeded that significantly over the years. Our first two funds, we did full return of capitals in just a couple of years. Both those funds still have literally assets in them that our investors are just participating in the ongoing cash flow. They have lots of equity in them. And that's kind of our MO is like we look to basically run a fund, buy 10 to 12 assets, execute the value add plan on all those assets, identify the ones that we feel are just the sweetheart ones, right? They just exceeded expectations, they perform flawlessly, um, you know, execute the business plan and everything, but then ultimately kind of pick the ones that we just don't see the long-term future. And for whatever reason, doesn't mean they're bad assets, just means that we've identified the cherries of the group. Um, you know, do a cash out refinance on the cherry, put long-term debt in place, and then divested the other assets over a period of 3 to 5 years, get a full return of capital back to our investors to where at the end of the day they've made a lot of money, they got all the original capital back, but now they've got assets that literally they'll own for a very long time. We have a low basis in, and we'll just ride off into the sunset in the cash flow model, like literally perpetual cash flow for many years to come. That's kind of who we are. That's our business plan is more long term than most. We're not the in and out in 3 to 5 years. We really look for the investor type that is more in a they're looking for growth, but I'd say equal amounts of wealth preservation. Like they're making a lot of money, they're doing well in whatever profession or investments they've already made, and they're looking to make good returns on great solid investments, but they're also not looking necessarily, have capital or tax events every couple of years because the tax problem when you get cash out of an investment every couple of years, you got another problem on your hands. You got to go find another investment to go into. And so we like the long-term cash flow model, keeping our investors in it for a very long time. And just it becomes set it and forget it for them. So that's kind of our MO, and that's kind of what we target to do.
What do you love most about, and you did mention some of this in the very beginning, with when it comes to parking lots, when it comes to mobile home parks, what are some of the reasons that you absolutely love those asset classes above everything else?
Yeah, I mean, mobile home parks, it's pretty straightforward. We got a major affordable housing crisis in the country. There's a huge barrier to entry with new mobile home parks being built. Municipalities don't like them. It's not a great tax basis for them to allow folks to build new mobile home parks. And then also you got the NIMBY syndrome where, not my backyard. So folks that live in subdivisions don't want a mobile home park built right next to their subdivision because they fear it's going to affect their home values. And so very new little supply, if any, gets built on an annual basis. In fact, more mobile home parks get torn down and redeveloped on an annual basis than that get built. So it's got this diminishing supply, and so we like that, right? There's a barrier to entry. There's just not new supply. We know that if we buy a great mobile home park in a great market that has a high demand for affordable housing, that like we're insulated. The new competitor's not going to come in down the road and build another one. It's just not going to happen. And then on top of that, you know, you could take any city where we own any of our mobile home parks or any mobile home park in general, and I can promise you that if you want to try to make a apples to apples comparison, like the quality of our mobile homes within our communities might be that of maybe a B minus or B plus class apartment complex, right? Maybe an apartment complex that was built back in like the 90s, late 80s, mid 90s, something like that. I can guarantee you that you'll get a better quality living experience and a better quality product, probably more square footage for about 30% less in our mobile home community than what you're going to get in that apartment complex. And on top of that, you're not going to have a neighbor above you, below you, and to either side. You're going to have your own parking space. You're going to have a little bit of yard. Some communities have amenities like pools and clubhouses and just community events and things like that. And so it's basically the best affordable type of housing that exists in any market. In fact, I'll take it to another level. There is no cheaper in any of the communities that we own, any cities that they're located in. There's literally no cheaper housing option available. So if you can't afford to live in a mobile home in one of our mobile home communities in any of the markets that we own in 18 states at present, you're basically homeless or living in your car. And so it truly is kind of like the last frontier of affordable housing. And the thing is like these things aren't like, I know some mobile home parks exist that are old metal tin boxes. They're really run down. That's not what we do. I mean, the quality products that are being built today, like new in the factory, they literally use majority of the same materials that are used in stick built homes. And so like the quality of product that you get is like night and day to what most people think it is, or maybe what it was decades past. And so it's a great option for folks that want to live the American dream and want to have an affordable option to do so. So that's why we love it. We love the barrier to entry. We love being able to like serve folks and serve the affordable housing need. It's rewarding on many different fronts. As far as parking, um, many reasons why we love that. But like I'd mentioned, we look at it as a cash flow covered land play, but like it's got to make a lot of cash flow a day. Like it has to truly stand on its own as a cash flow investment. We're not developers, so we're not putting a developer hat on saying, hey, it just needs to make a little bit of money to cover our holding costs until we get to redevelop it. No, it's got to stand alone as its own. But then it's also on top of that, it's got to check the box of this is in an irreplaceable location, and inevitably, it will be worth something higher at a later date. But its lowest use today is still parking, but it still makes a ton of economic sense as parking. And so we love the idea behind that because most major cities throughout the country, and most folks aren't aware of this, they've actually eliminated their parking minimums for new developments. And so historically, what we used to happen is like the tower that you're in right now. I don't know how many units are in it, but developer goes to get approval. Well, the city says you need to build, 1.25 or 1.5 parking spaces for every, 1,000 square feet. There's some type of formula associated with that. And most of the time, that basically equated to excess parking. The developer just had to build more parking than was ever going to be used, and they just had to do it in order to get approved. Well, come to find out that we don't need all the parking. And then on top of that, developers make more money by building another 10 condo units than 10 parking spaces, right? And so now developers are going in and basically only building the absolute minimum parking. I mean, literally bare minimum parking. So like parking spaces are going away throughout these urban core locations and a lot of these tourist destinations. And in a lot of areas like Clearwater Beach, where we own, there's a moratorium. You can't even build a standalone parking garage. And so all these new developments that are going up and all these surface lots that are getting redeveloped, they're putting in parking, but only enough to serve their specific need. They're not putting in excess. So again, you got this diminishing supply of parking in these great locations. And we just want to basically serve that market, have a increasing demand for our parking, and then know that we can ride that wave until that higher and better use comes along.
Kevin, when you guys get these, are you making improvements to operations or to the property itself to be able to increase cash flow from that property?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said, we're true and true value add guys. And so, a lot of parking, I'd say there's a couple different levels of value add and a couple levers we pull, but a lot of parking, a number of the assets we purchased were owned by just mom and pops. They've owned them for many, many years. They've got antiquated technology or no technology at all. And so they're not tracking like the pricing within the marketplace. They're not adjusting based on supply demand factors. They're not adjusting the pricing based on special events, concerts and sports events and things like that. And so like those are really easy levers to pull. There's great technology now. We can install technology, allows us to literally change pricing on our phone, right? Like literally adapt to what the market's doing. We can see how many spaces are left within each respective garage or lot, and we can adjust on the fly. And so like that's an easy lever to pull where we can increase the NOI substantially on any mom and pop owned asset. But then on top of that, even buying from sophisticated operators, like I'm trying to use this Clearwater Beach garage one because that was an interesting one. It was owned by the city. Well, it was a public-private partnership. The city owned half of it. They partnered with a local developer that built it. But historically, municipalities are bad business operators and bad business owners and operators. And so They kept the rates artificially low, to best, I guess, serve the people. In their mind, to best serve the people, but they were losing money every month, and for like the 5 years they owned it, they were losing money month over month, year over year. Like, it was a horrible investment, and they were charging $3 an hour when we bought the asset. The going rate in the area was $6 an hour. But as you know, at the beaches on busy weekends, there's flat rates. You pay 30, 40, $50. Like, it gets adjusted based on special events, and they weren't doing any of that. And so we literally just came in on that one. Simply put, we doubled the NOI. Like, we knew that if we changed it from $3 an hour to $6 an hour, no one was going to stop parking there because there's nowhere else to park. And that's still the going rate of what the rest of the market is. And so just that one lever alone, we literally doubled the revenue of the property. It was absolutely crazy. So while we might have bought it on like a 5.5 cap going in on actuals, we increased that a few hundred basis points just by making that one change and installing new technology to adjust the pricing accordingly. So just little things like that. It didn't need any structural improvements or repairs. It was only 6 years old. The garage, they just were operating it poorly. That's the best way to put it, and that happens quite often.
Kevin, I love everything you're doing. And like I said, I think parking's ingenious. I talk about it all the time because I live in the city. So everything you said, I understand, right?
I
Like,
wish I'd have bought everything in Tampa, 15 years ago. 717 kind of owns everything down there. They
yeah,
they saw the opportunity back, in 2009 and 10 when everything crashed. You could buy anything you want in downtown Tampa in 9 and 10 and 11.
especially here in
But
Channel Side. I mean, people don't
absolutely.
understand, like, this
Yeah.
building didn't exist 3 years ago.
Oh
Like,
no.
none of this
Yep.
did, right?
Yep.
And I see everything you see. Like, the parking's $30 to $50 for like 2 hours or 3 hours when there's events because the arena's right next to
Yep.
me. Like, here, if you buy right here where I am, you if you get a 1 bedroom, you don't even get parking. They don't even have
That's
enough
right.
parking spaces for
Well, there
you.
you go. To my point, the parking minimums got
Everything you
eliminated.
just said, I was like, yeah. You're summing up my life living in the city, 100% accurate. So, look, there's a lot of people who are watching this and want to get in. They want to learn more about investing and see if there's an opportunity for them to get in and get the kind of returns that are available for them and start learning the industry. What's the best advice you have in the next steps to somebody that's interested in talking to you a little bit more about jumping in and investing?
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about us and the company Sunrise Capital, you can just go to our websites. Pretty informative, lots of resources there. It's investwithsunrise.com. You can get access to our current offering that we have open. You can see the assets that are in that offering. You can also learn more about historically what we've done in past funds. I mean, we've got a lot of resources there. We even go as far as like putting case studies up of deals. We've got appraisals of deals of like before and after. We've got details, granular details about, what we bought for, how much we spent on improvements, what we exited out of, how many years later, what type of return that provided for investors. So you can learn just who we are, what we do, how we do it. And you can find all that info again at investwithsunrise.com.
Kevin, thanks for coming on with us again today.
Ty, thanks, my friend. It's been a lot of fun, brother.
Yeah, same man, as always. So listen, if you're watching this, I gotta tell you, it's brilliant. And when I started this and I said he talks about it and I can't stop thinking about it, it's really true. There's a few different asset classes that I think are just super, super cool. And parking, I've never heard anybody talk about. You probably haven't heard about it either, but it can be so lucrative, especially living in the city. I see it every single day. But here's the thing: you can lose your butt if you try to get into this stuff and do it on your own. I'm sure you can. I can definitely tell horror stories from people that I know that got in and lost everything because they just misassessed the cost of fixing things. They didn't have the money to make the improvements that Kevin is talking about. So they got in and lost money. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. But what's really cool about what Sunrise does is they give you an opportunity to get in and then be able to get these really good returns. And again, if you go to sunrisecapitalinvestors.com, you can actually check. And actually, Kevin gave us another link instead. But if you go to investwithsunrise.com, investwithsunrise.com, their website's phenomenal. It shows a lot of the projects, past projects, what's going on currently. It shows you a lot of the returns, things like best you can expect to get. It's the best put together real estate investing site I've ever seen. So like any information you want, you should check it out. And what's nice about this is it gives you an opportunity to get in without an opportunity to lose your butt. Like you're working with experts. You get to learn the industry, see how it works, see how the decisions are made, and learn about this. And if you want to go and do it on your own, eventually you can. But what's nice is that you have this protection and all this knowledge that comes with it, still get the returns, and still going to get into some really, really, really cool asset classes. So make sure you check it out at investwithsunrise.com. Remember, remember, this is like all this information doesn't mean anything if you don't take action. So the action to take is go check out investwithsunrise.com. Check it out. Learn a lot about the investment market with both parking and with mobile home parks as well. It's really interesting and a lot of money can be made. So make sure you check it out. Investwithsunrise.com. Again, thank you very much for your time. Take care and have a great day. And again, don't forget to check out investwithsunrise.com. Thanks. Take care.